He was one of history's most well-known conquerors, known for his aggressive expansion. His short life sent shockwaves through the ancient world. He built one of the largest empires spanning 3 continents and cemented for himself a unique place in history, all without losing a single battle. By the time he was only 32, he had established himself as one of the most fearsome leaders of all time. But then, in a moment, it all came crashing down. This is Alexander the Great. But who really was Alexander? And how did he rise so quickly? And what made him so great anyway? His story is one of ambition, strategy and vision, blending cultures and reshaping civilization forever. So sit back, relax and grab yourself a cup of tea as we dive into the extraordinary life of a man who tried to unite the ancient world. Alexander the Great was born in 356 BC in Pella, which was the ancient capital of Macedonia, to King Philip II and Queen Olympus. From the beginning, he was already immersed in a world of ambition and power. His father was a brilliant military leader who was able to transform Macedonia into one of the dominant powers in ancient Greece. His mother, on the other hand, may have been the one to inspire his sense of destiny. From an early age, she nurtured legends about his divine lineage, claiming that he was descended from Achilles, one of the heroes of the Trojan War, as well as Zeus, the leader of the Greek gods. As a child, Alexander demonstrated remarkable intelligence, courage, and determination. According to legend, when he was 12, a wild horse known as Bucephalus was brought to his father. The horse was unruly, and none of the king's horse trainers were able to tame it. This, however, didn't hold true for Alexander. Upon observing the horse, unlike the people who had tried before him, he realised it was afraid of its own shadow, and so he turned it to face the sun. Once the horse had calmed down, he then proceeded to mount and ride it, leaving the onlookers amazed. Not only did this showcase his exceptional confidence, skill and understanding of animals, but also earned the recognition of his father, who is said to have exclaimed, "My boy, you must find a kingdom big enough for your ambitions. Macedonia is too small for you." Bucephalus later accompanied Alexander through his military campaigns, and as such became a symbol of strength and loyalty. Philip went on to ensure that Alexander's education was entrusted to one of the greatest minds of all time, Aristotle. As a student of Aristotle, Alexander developed a deep appreciation for philosophy, science and literature, which shaped both his worldview and leadership style. He was particularly inspired by the stories found in Homer's Iliad, and as a result ended up carrying a copy with him throughout his conquests. By the time that he was a teenager, Alexander was already fighting alongside his father, and at the tender age of 18 he successfully commanded a section of the Macedonian army against a Greek coalition of city-states, including Athens and Thebes, at which point he displayed charisma, ambition and tactical brilliance well beyond his age, attributes which would later go on to define his reign. After Alexander's early years, his path towards greatness unfolded rapidly. In 336 BC, tragedy struck, when his father King Philip II was assassinated, and at just 20 years old, Alexander ascended to the throne of Macedonia. It didn't go without its challenges though, as several Greek city-states saw an opportunity, and they rebelled against Macedonian authority. Alexander, however, swiftly crushed these uprisings, displaying his decisiveness and military prowess. This subsequently helped in solidifying his leadership and securing the loyalty of his army and political allies, laying the foundation for his future conquests. Once his rule over Greece was secure, Alexander turned his attention to something else, fulfilling his father's vision of conquering the largest empire in the world at the time, the Persian Empire. In 334 BC, he crossed into Asia Minor with a force of about 40,000 soldiers. This marked the beginning of his legendary military campaigns. Alexander's first major victory came at the Battle of Granicus, where he defeated a larger Persian army and established himself as a formidable opponent, one whose tactics significantly outshone those of his opponent. This victory opened up the path to Western Asia Minor and enabled Alexander to seize key cities such as Halicarnassus, further weakening the Persian hold over the region. After securing the region of Anatolia, Alexander set his sights on the heart of the Persian Empire. In 333 BC, he faced Darius III at the Battle of Issus in modern-day Turkey. Despite being outnumbered, Alexander's tactical brilliance led to one of the most decisive victories against the Persian Empire. Darius was forced to flee, and left behind not only a large portion of his army, but also his family. Upon capturing them, Alexander supposedly treated them with respect, but went on to marry Darius' daughter in order to solidify his claim to the Persian throne. During this time, Alexander had control over a large section of the eastern Mediterranean, and continued to push on as far as Egypt, where he was greeted as a liberator by the local people who had been oppressed under Persian rule. His time in Egypt was marked by two major events, the first being the founding of the city of Alexandria, home to its monumental buildings and famous library, which attracted scholars from all over the world. The second being his visit to the Oracle of Amun at Siwa. The oracle was considered one of Egypt's important religious centres, and involved a 500-mile trek through the desert to get there. When he arrived, the oracle declared him to be the son of Amun, aligning him with the Egyptian god Amun-Ra, who was often identified with the Greek god Zeus. This served to bolster his sense of grandiosity and further reinforced his self-image as a god-king, as well as having the convenient side effect of helping solidify his control over the region and strengthen his influence over the Egyptian population. The final blow to the Persians came in 331 BC at the Battle of Gaugamela in what is now present-day Iraq. Just as before, Alexander's forces outmaneuvered Darius' much larger army. Darius once again had to flee the battlefield, leaving his empire vulnerable. Shortly after, Alexander was able to capture the Persian capitals of Babylon, Susa and Persepolis, the last of which he famously burnt to the ground in an act of revenge for the time that the Persians destroyed Athens. Darius was eventually assassinated by one of his own generals, and with his death, the Persian Empire effectively came to an end. Alexander's conquest marked the end of what was known as the Achaemenid dynasty, and the beginning of his reign over one of the largest empires in history. Like with many of the places he conquered, he declared himself king and sought to integrate the local customs into his rule. You'd think that for most people, conquering as far as Egypt and into the Middle East would be enough, but not for Alexander. He decided to push on further, crossing over the Indus River and into India. The most notable battle of this campaign was the Battle of Hydaspes, fought against King Porus, in which he faced off against a formidable army containing cavalry and war elephants, and once again, despite being heavily outnumbered, was able to pull off a dramatic victory, catching Porus's forces off guard by crossing the river at night. That being said, in the aftermath, he allowed Porus to continue his rule over the territory, which further helped solidify Alexander's reputation for blending military prowess with political diplomacy. By this point though, his troops were exhausted from years of continuous campaigning in the unfamiliar territory, and they were longing for home and therefore staged a mutiny and forced Alexander to turn back. As a result, he began to retrace his steps until he eventually reached Babylon. Even the return journey wasn't easy though, as it involved having to pass through the Gedrosian Desert in present-day Iran, which resulted in significant losses due to the extreme conditions. And finally, in 323 BC, at just 32 years old, about a year after returning to Babylon, Alexander died. His vision was to turn Babylon into the capital of his empire, which would unite both the East and the West, but he fell ill after a banquet and several days of drinking. The exact cause of his death remains unknown, but many attribute it to something like malaria or typhoid fever, some going as far as saying he may have even been poisoned. Still, without a clear successor, it left his empire in a precarious position. His generals began to fight over the territory which he'd conquered, and in the end this led to the eventual division of the empire into four main Hellenistic kingdoms. Despite his short life, Alexander had an enormous impact on the ancient world, so much so that he even garnered respect from certain more modern figures. Napoleon, for example, is known to have been greatly inspired by him. even attempting to build an empire himself which would surpass Alexander's. Ultimately, Alexander the Great left in his wake a record of not only being undefeated in battle, but creating one of the largest empires in history, spreading Greek culture throughout the known world, uniting people of many different backgrounds, and establishing cities which continued on for centuries afterwards. His ambition shaped the ancient world and continues to inspire people to this day. As for whether he deserves the title of great though, I'll let you decide. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time.